Thank you all for joining us today. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I've been fighting with this webcam for months, and I should probably just give up and buy a new one. So you are here for a special ALA Libcomix and Graphic Medicine event. We're calling it Graphic Medicine Responds, Comics in the Time of COVID-19. The voice you're hearing right now is Matthew No. I am here as the Resources and Toolkits Chair for the ALA Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable. And you can find me on social media all over at Know the Mat. I also work with Graphic Medicine, directly with Allison MK and also Ian Williams to run graphicmedicine.org. And I'm going to just briefly say who our panelists are, as you can see them on the screen, and then I'm going to pass it over. We're going to go in the order you see on the screen. We'll hear a little bit from each panelist, and then we'll open it up for just discussion amongst our panel and you all here in the chat. As it was posted, please try to put questions in the Q&A so we can more easily keep track of them. And if you want to tweet about being here, you'll want to use the hashtag Libcomix online, and also maybe hashtag graphic medicine. So first up, you'll hear from Alice Jaggers. Alice is a librarian and one of the co-editors of graphicmedicine.org. You can find her on all kinds of social media platforms with her handles there on the screen. And also Alice has a blog where she updates us on upcoming graphic medicine titles and shares programming ideas and all kinds of great things. Next, after that, you'll hear from MK Czerwiec. MK is also a co-editor of graphicmedicine.org. You'll find her all over as Comic Nurse. She's also a cartoonist, and you can find her at comicnurse.com. Then we'll switch gears a little bit and talk to Beth Barnett. Beth is a history cartoonist, which is one of the coolest titles out there. Beth is going to talk about the diary comics that they're creating here during COVID-19. You can find them all over at the Beth Barnett on social media, and there's a link to their webpage there. And then another cartoonist, Maria Photinakis, is an illustrator and comics artist who's also doing some diary comics during COVID-19. Both of them are amazing creators all the time, but right now they're really capturing something special in this moment, I think, and I'm excited to hear from them. You can find Maria on social media, and there's the handle there, and a link to their website as well. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna control the slides because that's the way Zoom works best. And I'm going to pass it over to you, Alice, and just tell me when you want me to click the next slide button, okay?
Sounds good.
There we go.
Okay, so this is me. I am Alice Jaggers. As Matthew mentioned, I co-edit graphicmedicine.org, and I also have a blog where I talk a lot about graphic medicine, upcoming titles, and other medical librarian stuff, as I am a medical librarian. Okay, so next slide. So why I am asked to be here is because I created on the Graphic Medicine website a page about COVID comics, and I organized it, and MK Czerwiec and I are updating it. MK has done a very great job on that, so thank you, MK. So what you're seeing is how some of the themes that I used when organizing the page. And as I was organizing it, I realized that it really was a microcosm, a reflection of graphic medicine as a whole. So the only theme that's really missing is the caregiver theme. And by caregiver, I mean those that are not professional healthcare providers, but those like caring for family members and friends. And my husband Richard pointed out today that part of the reason that we don't see that is because they're not caring for them. If a loved one is diagnosed with COVID, they go to the hospital and you're not allowed to contact them. So I thought that was an interesting omission and how it doesn't reflect it. But so quickly take you through, so my different themes: educational, ethics, care providers, patients, humorous and coping, and historical are, there's definitely not a single thing. Generally, comics, graphic medicine, it's very intersectional. You can fall under more than one category, more than one theme. But these are just some examples of each of these themes. So educational, this was on NPR, NPR correspondent Malaka Garib. And so what educational is doing is it's telling you about the facts. It's telling you, trying to teach you, communicate some healthcare information, although it often has a story in and of itself. So a lot of graphic medicine can be said to be educational, but in this case, this was the primary focus, is education. And ethics, so Rachel L. House, that picture is above ethics. And this is actually from early, many of these are from very early, so that one's actually from March 9th, and talking about what lives matter. And I think that's a big theme in medical and health in general, the ethics and what to do with people that are ill. Then we also have perspectives from care providers. And this particular one, Dr. Nathan Gray is adapting from some suggestions, Vital Talk suggestions of what to say, how to communicate with patients about this. And the perspectives allow you kind of a glimpse, empathy in what it's like as a care provider. I also have an example of a patient perspective. In this case, it's someone who has an IVF cycle canceled, delayed, and that's COVID literally pulling the rug out from underneath them. And humorous and coping, I chose to use one of the ones that's much more humorous, and it's an interesting intersection because not all of those that are coping are funny, but we, MK and I kind of discussed this and that grouping them together because humor is a way of coping. And this one is from very early. Tiny Snack Comics has done a Quarantine series. This is the first one, and what the main industries are. And it is typically a snake. And then lastly, a historical. So many of these, this No Ordinary Flus, King County Public Health, Meredith Lee Vollmer, Matthew French, doing this as talking about the education in 1918 flu pandemic. And that's a lot of what we have, the differences and the similarities between the 1918 flu and what we can learn from what was done historically. And if, Matthew, if you can switch slides. So these are just the attributions of what the names are and then where you can find them. And so I just wanted to make sure that everything was correctly attributed to all of the people, and it's organized by kind of vaguely where the comic is on the next page. So if anyone wants to take a screenshot of that, I know the blue is hard to read, I apologize, to be able to find those in the future, although most all of these are available on the Graphic Medicine page, as MK has put in the chat very helpfully. So. That's it.
Thanks, Alice. And if I'm sure people have questions and further thoughts on this, they can drop them in the chat or the Q&A. And it'll be interesting to think about the categorization you've got here when we hear from the other panelists and see how things work together. So I'm going to switch the slides. And next, we're going to hear from MK. Hi, MK.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. So following up on Alice's presentation, those are just a few of the examples. The page that we've curated has actually gotten quite large, and it's interesting to think about how we're going to be kind of curating it in the future as this expands. We've basically had to update it every day as more comics emerge. And I'm really happy to say that I'm hearing from a lot of professors that the collection is being used as a teaching tool in a lot of classrooms. I think that really speaks to the power of comics as an educational tool in the moment and the immediacy of the response. Comics, as I said, are such an efficient educational tool. I know everyone here knows that. One of the other vitally important roles of graphic medicine, of course, is bearing witness. And that really is what is happening through this collection. Some of the initial comics we curated felt like news dispatches from the front lines, and we're very, very grateful to have members of the frontline medical community who are also very treasured members of the graphic medicine community producing and sharing work right now. And of course, today's bearing witness is tomorrow's primary source historic document, right? Initially, the COVID-19 pandemic triggered echoes of the AIDS crisis for me, which is when I did most of my clinical work and is the subject of my graphic memoir, Taking Turns. But it's interesting is that I find that those echoes are actually being eclipsed as time passes. The first modern spike of public health comics noted in Matthew No's scoping review of graphic medicine was during the AIDS crisis. Because then, like now, the efficiency of the medium of comics became a useful vehicle for communicating important information and narrative and bearing witness. But interestingly, many, if not most, of the public health comics from the AIDS crisis are lost to history. I'm actually grateful for this aspect of this moment that we are in now, this globally connected community via the internet that, in a worldwide graphic medicine community that enables us to curate and support a page like this one that we are currently very proud of. Because of the work that it's being able to do today, as I said, being used as a teaching tool and bearing witness, but also for the work it will do in the future to help us remember and reflect and try to understand and preserve the history of comics in this moment. And as we were first assembling this collection for the graphic medicine website, I couldn't help but think about one major difference between the representations of HIV and coronavirus in comics, something that struck me very strong. We understand the world and we explain what happens in our world in stories. And for a story, we need characters. So naturally, since the virus becomes a character, and it shows up as a character in comics about HIV, and it shows up as a character in comics about COVID-19. Next slide. So when HIV emerged as a threat to public health, we didn't actually have an image of it. So it was represented metaphorically, like you see here. This is from a 1987 coloring book. It's a green, amorphous, scary monster. And it was about, this image was about 6 years into the HIV/AIDS pandemic. Eventually, and most images were sort of this way, sort of monstrous and almost universally green. But eventually, thanks to electron microscopy, we did have an image of the virus eventually. This second image there, 16 years later, is still threatening. It's still chasing, but comics, as in this image from Toby Morris, excuse me, but more clearly understood, we have a much clearer picture of this virus. It's less amorphous. And this middle image there is from the graphic novella Positive by Tom Bowden. And that third character there, interestingly, as the threat of HIV was diminished by combination retroviral medications, its comic representation changed as well. This image was created for an educational comic about maternal disclosure of HIV status. The team of researchers and mothers that designed this character to be jarring enough to be taken seriously, but not frightening, because this is something that was already inside the body of mom or the child or whoever was dealing with this. But interestingly, again, notice that they're all green, like Frankenstein, like something we don't necessarily want inside of our body. On the color wheel, green is the opposite of red, the color of blood, something that we do want inside our body. But with coronavirus, we had an image immediately. We had this electron microscopy image immediately. And in the United States, it was the one distributed by the CDC, created by Medical Illustrated, and curiously colored red. So characters that follow tend to take on that shape, but not the color. So this is a very small image from a much larger, amazing educational comic by Monica Lalanda about the symptoms of HIV. And in this case, it's green. Again, I think going with that instinct towards green is something we don't want in our body. I'm really fascinated by this interplay between red and green, between these two viruses. The next image actually sort of explicitly calls out these instinctual uses of those colors, right? This is, again, from Malika Gharib in a comic that's on our website. Green is sick, and pink and red are more towards a healthy. But that color dichotomy has been confounded in COVID-19 comics, again, because I think in that initial CDC image. In the next image by Toby Morris, which he uses the red and pink traditionally in the past for sort of a healthy color palette to actually indicate viral spread in his comic. And I'll be watching really closely the ways that the COVID-19 character evolves in comics over time and in our world, of course. Looking forward to the day when maybe it will just be a crummy roommate. So then just to wrap up the next slide, if you'd like to read more about my work during the AIDS crisis, this is a shameless self-promotion. This is my book. And just as a last note, graphic medicine is a community, and the value of the community is that we like to come together. But unfortunately, we had to cancel our conference, like so many things have been canceled. But in the spirit of being a community, graphic medicine has been hosting a weekly Zoom event during the COVID-19 shelter-in-place orders, and we provide a moderator for our community, a theme, a drawing exercise, and an opportunity to share the work and the experiences that we're all having right now. And those happen on Sundays at noon Eastern time, and you can convert that time, hopefully, to your time zone. If you're not able to make that time zone, I have been posting every week what the exercise was, so if you want to participate in that way and share your work. And Matthew is dropping into the chat now a link to find out how to register for this weekly event and join us. And thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, MK, for joining us. Yeah, the evolution of the illustrations is going to be fascinating to watch. I hadn't put together the color wheel part quite as much. So, all right, so next up, we are going to hear from Beth Barnett, whose name I think I'm saying correctly now. Beth, are you there?
I am here. Hello, I'm Beth Barnett. I always make a point of pronouncing it to rhyme with garnet or darnet because my mother-in-law is very, very particular about this. And yes, so I am a history cartoonist. I specialize in doing comics about heroes, health, and history. In terms of history, I tend to focus in the First World War. I've done a number of comics on trench warfare, the Arab Revolt, and also the influenza of 1918 in the greater Boston area. And given my interest in making comics about history and also my work in graphic medicine, I do diary comics under the title of Anxiety Diaries. I've collected about 60 of them into a little book called No Rest for the Anxious. And as COVID-19 was starting to spread, I sat down and realized that I wanted to do a daily diary comic about not just what I was thinking, but what was going on in the world, with the idea that this would actually act as a primary source for future historians to look at. In part of it, I make sure that I am citing sources when I'm pulling things from a news article, particularly if I'm pulling more direct quotes. I'll write it out as best that I possibly can, knowing that URLs are difficult to write out by hand, but including the writer, the author, and the title and the source. But within doing my work, I really am striving to, thank you, Matthew. I'm really very much striving to create something that is rapid. I can draw each page pretty quickly, and they're all very simply done in black and white because this is me sitting by hand. The bigger piece on the left is a sample from my graphic memoir, Dreamers of the Day, and the other two little squares are from Social Distancing, which is the name of my comic. I'm looking at the chat and laughing. What I really like doing with my work is being able to center my own emotions and what I'm feeling. And while I try to every day connect it back to COVID-19, some days my comics just don't, because I'm trying to reflect how my brain is feeling. Part of in my process that I have is that I draw everything by hand. This way there exists multiple places that this lives, not just the physical thing in my hand, but also it is online, more so as a way of having backups in case like my house were to burn down or something, to that extent that it would remain able to be shared and looked at by others. That's pretty much it.
All right. Thank you, Beth.
You're welcome.
And I will hear from you again in a moment for questions.
Yes.
All right. So next up, assuming I can get this to work, is Maria. Hi, Maria. Are you there?
I am. I'm here. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. I'm Maria Photinakis. I am an illustrator, comics artist in the greater Boston area. My interest in the last few years has been on memoir cartooning, simply because I'm self-centered like that. But it sort of shifted for me a few years ago when I went through some traumatic experiences relating to my father's death and my own postpartum anxiety. And I decided to start making the kind of comics that I felt would have helped me after going through those experiences, having my father in the ICU for a month and going through birth trauma and postpartum anxiety. I created, after a lot of therapy, a comic called Liminal State. Yeah, no worries, you can switch. And since I did that, and since talking to people who had gone through similar experiences, I've changed my focus a lot in doing more work like that looks inward in the hopes that it might help others feel less alone. So my daughter is now a toddler. She's turning 3 later this month. And with social distancing and COVID-19, my old processes for cartooning went totally out the window. I'm now without childcare and I'm the primary caretaker for my daughter all the time, while my husband tries to keep food on the table by working from home. So my old time that I used to have to cartoon a couple of days a week is now whatever few hours a week I can squeeze into my day, while my daughter is often wanting to sit on my lap watching me draw. So trying to bear witness to everything that's been going on around me, while also taking care of my family, taking care of my elderly mother who lives nearby, worrying obsessively about my brother who lives in Japan who got COVID-19. I was thinking, my brain's a sieve already with everything that's going on, just raising a little kid. There's no way in 5 years I'm going to remember most of what I'm going through right now if I don't write it down. My professional background originally was in journalism, and I took a lot of classes back in my college day with like Pulitzer Prize winning memoirists. So I had some tools in my back pocket about the importance of memoir work and how to pull from that even when you're going through hell. So I've been working on my own visual diary, which on a good week, I can update twice a week, and it's called Extraordinary Times. And this is me just trying to document what's been going on in my life, the minutia of child rearing when you can't leave the house, trying to keep my mother safe, trying to keep my family from falling apart, trying to keep myself from falling apart, while just trying to keep a balanced view if I can without being too Pollyanna or too glum. I'm just trying to document things as best and as accurately as I can in my life. And I have found it very healing for myself. And the extemporaneous nature of this kind of work has also been really freeing. I only get like 3 hours a week to work, so I'm rushing these off as quickly as I can. And, I'm not thinking about narrative flow. I'm just getting things down and not worrying about it. So it's been just an extraordinary experience. It's extraordinary times. And as long as this goes on, I'm going to try and keep going. And so far I've filled up 2 watercolor books full of my entries from what's going on. And already when I look back at the entries from when I started, it's remarkable how much my life has still already changed, and how much it seems like ages ago, even though it was just a month. So I've gotten wonderful feedback from people, that, especially other people with young kids at home, that they feel less alone reading this. And that's been in my tiny little space when I get to work on this, that kind of is what keeps me going. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.
No, thank you for joining us and sharing. I can't believe you filled up that much space with these already. But I also can't believe it's been a full month of working at home for a lot of us already. So there's that. So I think there's one more slide in here. If we switch over. Yeah, this was like the last slide in the deck before I can close this and maybe get people to turn their webcams on so we can chat. So this is just a reminder that the COVID-19 comics page is over on graphicmedicine.org. And the ALA Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable is doing all sorts of virtual events and programming right now. This is just one of them. You can find out all that's going on with Libcomix online at the link on the screen, and maybe one of my colleagues can drop it in the chat as well. That way it's easily clicked. But so yeah, I'm gonna click stop share and hopefully not break everything. Okay. Now let's see if we can turn people's video on. Are you all able to start your cameras?
No.
No. Okay.
It says you stopped it.
Yeah.
I didn't stop anything. Okay, I clicked the button. See if you can do it now.
Here we go.
I can see everyone's faces. Hi.
Hello, wonderful people.
Hello, hello. All right, hello. So, hi everybody. So I'm going to. I see the chat here. I'm not talking about turning on the video for you, Dave. We tried that experiment at the New England Graphic Medicine Conference and broke everything. So yeah, do you all have a preference? Do you want to talk amongst yourselves and ask each other questions first, or do you want me to pitch you the ones that are in the Q&A?
I'm happy to do either.
Okay, I'll pitch some from the Q&A.
Pitch us, and then we'll go from there.
All right. So let's see. There's a question of asking, will this be recorded? Yes, it will be recorded. I believe it's actually live streamed through YouTube at the same time. So that one's good. We'll be able to get a copy of the PowerPoint later. Yes, if you email me, I'm happy to send it to anyone that needs it. Okay. All right. Actual questions for the panelists now. From A. David Lewis, following on Allison MK's curation project, as well as Beth and Maria's work, how does one keep from being subsumed, so to speak, by the depressing and saddening elements of these comics, How do we bear witness without feeling beaten down by it?
So shall I jump in first? All right, so I'm jumping in first. As I've mentioned during my talk, I had depression and generalized anxiety disorder. So keeping my own mental health has been really key. Part of what I'm finding with doing these comics is that this being able to sit and process is actually really therapeutic for me. I'm able to sort of take a broad overview of the day and look at what is most important. Not every day is it some news story. Sometimes it's just, I recently did an episode about Easter, and it was just a sort of looking at like what sort of the perfect Easter was versus what happened this year, which was not by any means on paper the perfect Easter, but being able to just sit and spend time with my husband, that didn't have anything to do with what was going on in the world apart from the fact of what day it was. And I talked about the fact that we can't leave the house, but it was still fine because we got to hang out together. But I'm also, in doing these, because I'm doing a reporting aspect of it, is that I'm making sure that the sites that I'm only going to, about 3 to 4 websites that I'm pulling information from. I'm not pulling stuff from Twitter because by and large that isn't, you can't back it up. So I'm looking at ProPublica, NPR, Vox as like my primary pages that I read. And having these specific things I look at in a specific time frame that I look at them is one way that keeps me from getting too overwhelmed and depressed by what's going on.
I was muted there. I can go next. So that's a really good question. I think for me, because I'm a nurse and I'm not currently working clinically, curating the comics helps me feel like, I guess it assuages a bit of kind of guilt, I guess, that I have, that I'm not kind of on the front line. But it makes it, by helping me feel like I'm doing something that is useful in the world. I'm also, believe it or not, I'm also teaching a class on dying and death in comics right now. So that was interesting timing. Did not, when we planned this course a year and a half ago, expect to be teaching it during a pandemic. But the thing is that I have to say that doing that work has the same feeling of like, I'm doing something that is of value. But what's harder for me is that I have to be able to kind of curate this, I have to figure out ways to dip into social media, particularly Twitter, in ways that aren't harmful to my mental health. And that's been a little more of the trick. And part of it is, it's been great working with Alice, because if I miss something, and with Matthew, because we kind of retweet things and move them around, I can maybe find it somewhere else. I can let go of this, FOMO of a comic that is important, that I know that we have a team out there, and it's okay if I protect my mental health by only checking into Twitter once a day.
I will say too that for me, what happens is that I have a particular part of the day that I engage with that, and I typically will engage kind of right after my first coffee in the morning, and then generally like an hour or so before I'm going to start my bedtime kind of routine. So that, and those are, because I also suffer from anxiety and depression, so those are the kinds of times during the day that I'm going to focus on this and engage with this. And I've also been doing a daily meditation, so that's like, this is when I'm engaging with it, so that all other times, it's like, nope, I'm not going to deal with that right now, I'll engage with it at these times. And I do kind of have to engage and then disengage and make sure that I am not becoming overwhelmed. And that did happen to me yesterday while I was finalizing the slides, that I had to kind of step back for a second, just because I had been on Twitter and seen some, disturbing, very sad stuff. And, it's about finding a balance. I found that when I wasn't doing anything in terms of engaging with COVID or engaging with social media, that it was becoming really difficult for me because I felt so disconnected from the world, and why I've really been appreciating the drawing together that we've been doing every week, because it makes me feel connected, despite the fact that, I'm in this tiny apartment that I really can't leave. So that's, I guess, hopefully helpful about how to manage that.
Yeah, I'll go next. I want to echo what everyone before me said, because a lot of what everyone said is sort of what I've been up to as well. I've been continuing to see my therapist virtually. I also have anxiety, so add that to the pool. I've found in my case that on top of my anxiety from everything that's going on and worrying about people and myself, being the primary parent has sort of reflared up a lot of the issues I went through when I was the stay-at-home mom for 18 months with my daughter. It was my darkest time of postpartum anxiety, and I have found being with her all the time without a break causing a lot of those feelings to come back, and trying to be very compassionate with myself when I feel those dark feelings bubbling up again. So my therapist has been amazing in helping me recognize that and seeing those patterns come up again. Trying to reach out to other parents in my situation, which is basically every parent right now. But finding community online, having a virtual cocktail hour with my friends every Friday has been an absolute lifesaver. We see each other's cats. We talk about work. I tell them how potty training's going with my kid. Like, that has been really saving me. That's been wonderful. But when I'm making my comics, I have to say I am often fighting the two edges of myself. There's a part of me that wants to be like weirdly finding a silver lining in all of this, which is an instinct I have to constantly fight because that's not healthy. And I had a lot of my friends are reading the comics I've been writing, and one of them texted me a week ago going, "Man, your comics are really dark. You got to break this up." And I put her in my comic texting me that, because I was like, you know what? This is my life right now. This is my reality. And I also don't want to sugarcoat that. If it sucks, it sucks. And it really sucks right now in a lot of ways. So I'm constantly fighting those two sides of me, trying to find that weird middle. And it's honestly really hard. I think in better times, I'd be thinking a lot more about my responsibility, about how my audience might react to what I'm doing, and if it's making them feel really down. Admittedly, I don't have that kind of bandwidth right now to think about it, just to be honest.
So that actually transitions pretty well to the next question I wanted to throw out there. This one's from Liz Young. She says to MK and Alice, but I actually think that all of you can answer this. When archiving, what is considered appropriate in the context of humor? I know that dark humor is a thing and there's controversial humor. What do you consider to post, and are there things you ignore?
So I've actually, I studied with Katie Watson at Northwestern, who's a medical humanist who has written a lot about gallows humor. Gallows humor is necessary, and maybe this isn't exactly the term or the kind of humor that someone was referring to, but I'm thinking of gallows humor as sort of like kind of a dark perspective on the current moment. To me, and this is what Katie Watson says, is that it has a place, and it has a role, and it has an appropriate audience and an inappropriate audience. And since we are kind of presenting this stuff very widely, my biggest concern is that we don't want to do any harm, right? Do no harm. We like to live by that ethical principle. So we figure that, we're not the only outlet in the world where this kind of comic can be. So there's plenty of other places it can go. I'm not looking to censor or control or decide, but I want the comics, I personally feel that the comics that appear on our site, I don't want to do any harm. So there have been a few images that I thought were a little more violent than I was comfortable with, that, I'm happy to post a link so someone can go look at them somewhere else, but I'm not necessarily going to put a screenshot or whatever. So I have been thinking a lot about curation, and this wasn't the question asked, but I just want to throw in here, as far as, we are at a place now where there's so much out there that we are thinking more in terms of curation. So at this point, the stuff that's getting to the site is stuff that I feel like is presenting another perspective or another, bearing witness to another experience. So the other day there was a great comic about someone sewing masks, and I thought, oh, that's not there yet. So that definitely went top of the line. And then, or are they, again, like, what is missing? Who's missing? Who's not? Who are we not hearing from? So that's what I'm really curating for right now.
So as a creator, my sense of humor, I like to say, isn't gallows humor. It's actually 6 feet under. I have a very dark sense of humor, and a lot of that comes from a coping mechanism around my anxiety and depression. And in my work, I try not to censor myself in terms of my sense of humor. First and foremost, my work is for myself. And the fact that I'm sharing it with everyone else in the world is like hoping that others can get some sort of feelings of that they're not alone. But pretty much whatever sort of level of censorship that I'm doing is not what I'm putting out, is more of an internal thing. Like, is this something that I want to have representing myself out in the world? And by and large, I haven't actually had to ask myself that very much, because it's just part of the, like, okay, this is how I'm feeling, I'm going to put this out. So yeah, I think we need to look at how humor is being used by ourselves and then also by others as we move forward with this.
So recently, I was listening to some experts who, it's at the Monterey Aquarium, and they have been using a lot of puns. And someone asked them, why are you using so many puns? And they said, well, it's one of the only ways of humor that isn't done to belittle someone else. And that's one thing that we want to make sure, that if someone is using humor to belittle a certain group of people or anything like that, we're not going to put that up there, because it's not okay. Whereas puns are, it's wordplay, so that's something it's a lot safer. But I think that humor is important in this, because so much is so dark that you need to have that levity. But you do definitely have to be careful, and that, beyond that, I echo what MK was saying.
Yeah.
So.
Going off of what Alice said, like, it's the whole using puns and such, it's totally fine to make fun of yourself, and it's one of those, if you're using humor, you don't punch down. Never punch down in humor, punch up. And for myself, my favorite punching bag is me. So yeah, it's just the pay attention to what you're making a joke about. So the jokes I make are usually at my own expense, and it's usually because I've done something stupid and I think it's funny, and I think other people will laugh at my ridiculousness. But I will never in comics make fun of someone who's not in the situation that I'm in.
Yeah, my only minor addition, again, echoing what everybody said, perfectly said, there is an element of ridiculousness if we look at it to a lot of the situation, like with the amount of cleaning and hand washing I know that I'm doing. And I felt it was important to acknowledge that, as important as it is to do it and take it seriously, it also feels absolutely ridiculous. And not to minimize how important those things are, but some of it does feel silly. And the weird rituals I have and we have in our household about how we now go into the house and how we quarantine our packages and our mail, like, it's necessary, but like weird and silly also. So I think it's, and everybody's got these adaptations that they've made in these times. So I think acknowledging that's been like cathartic for me, because everybody's adapting, and but it is funny in its own way.
Ready? So this is more of a combination of a couple of the questions that I just want to make sure we touch on. People have asked, is there a plan to publish the COVID-19 comics into a book in the future? And also thinking about, do any of you participate in collaborative comics projects? If so, are there ones that people could think about participating in? And I think there's a few of these things kind of going, but I want to hear what you all would recommend.
I'll go. There's a great Instagram account that I love called The Quarantine. That's sort of similar to what is going on with the graphic medicine website. That's not like a everybody draw thing with a prompt, but it's a great way to see all the different perspectives and different media that people are using to bear witness to what's going on. That's been my absolute favorite. So I don't know if that's quite what the question was in terms of that kind of art form, but that's been my favorite, just to see what other people are creating, even if it's outside of like the graphic medicine realm. I love that account.
For myself, I do intend to collect and publish this. I would ideally like if someone else were to publish it for me, but I am a zinester and self-publisher at heart in the true comics fashion. So once this is all over, I'm sure there will be at least one collected edition. Like Maria said, where she's filled up her 2 volumes of watercolor paper. I just started volume 6 of this little square notebook that I've been doing everything in. So there's a lot of material to get through, and yeah, but so that's why I hope someone else will take care of publishing it, because it's a lot.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the first major Comic-Con after all this, like when we can all start gathering again, it's going to be like nothing but this kind of thing.
I know.
It's going to be amazing.
It's going to be great. It's going to be like, I mean, I found that graphic medicine always sells pretty well at cons, especially if it's a mental health memoir. So seeing everyone's COVID comics is going to be really fun.
COVID Comic-Con. It
Yeah.
might happen. Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to publish mine, to be honest. I got that question on Monday, and I don't really know. It might just live online. I'm not sure yet.
Living online is still publishing.
That's true. I don't know if I'm going to put it like in a printed book,
Yeah.
self-published or not. I'm really not sure if I want to, but we'll see as this goes on.
Yeah. I mean, from a historian perspective, like I want this to be in a book so that people can track it down and they can make notes and they can annotate it themselves. I very much am wanting this work to be distributed broadly. But that very much comes from I'm creating a primary source, and I don't want it to be something that you have to go into the Beth Barnett archives 50 years from now and look through the originals. I would like people to be able to actually be like, oh, I found this in my my local used bookstore. I can easily read it this way.
So I just dropped a link in the chat. Penn State University Press has a call for work of COVID-19 comics for an anthology to be published, hopefully sometime in the near future.
Yeah, I think it's the start of 2021, first quarter.
Yeah, I'm looking at the press release here. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to do that thing where I combine a couple questions again, because I think they're similar. So I'm going to read both and let you all answer how you will. So via graphics, how is it possible to explain the severity and quote unquote realness of COVID-19? Like it's just a flu, only seniors are in danger. It's all plotted to trap us all in our house so the regime can do X. And are there sources of, doing this and how we might do that? And someone else asks, has there been any images addressing or efforts to curate COVID-19 comics and the gaslighting that some are warning against, or the gaslighting that we hear all of the time?
So in my comics, answering Shahar's question, I have these conversations a lot with my parents, or I did, especially at the early days. So in my comics, I would include myself and my reactions to what they were saying, with their own, like, this just the flu. And I think including a lot of sources from news sites is another way to help bring it in. And I like to record the numbers as much as I can. I've been a bit lax about that, but the global number of cases hit 2 million this morning. I'm definitely going to be including that in today's edition. And I think just the sort of, with doing like diary comics and such, being able to say, okay, this happened on this date, let's stack the numbers and let's see where things are going like a week later. Where are we now?
Yeah, citations, right? Like, I mean, that's yeah.
Yeah. I have a cite your sources. That is my rallying cry. It's the bridge the hill I will die on.
Yeah, I mean, and as a comics nerd, like, how exciting is it when your comic has footnotes? Like, I love that.
Oh my God.
No.
It's the best. I'm trying to figure out how to do footnotes for like a larger project, but yeah.
Let's see, Ashley Will says, I'm a librarian and would be cool to have your comics on the shelf, just to tie into the publishing question. I just wanted to echo and throw that out there because it's a big thing for Alice and I too. Let's see.
I'm not saying I won't, I'm just not sure.
I mean, I have an online store, so that's like, you can get my comics from there. And it's pretty great. I like having my books in libraries. It's like the nicest thing. Some of my stuff is in a couple colleges at Oxford, and it's like the nicest, like the best thing in the world to get emails being like, look, Beth, here's your book sitting in the wilds in this library.
So I think we are close to our time that we had scheduled. I'll keep asking some questions as long as you all hang out. Question from Avru is, any comments on collective remembering and collective amnesia when archiving our current history? What are the challenges for librarians, especially during the digital age? Especially thinking of MK's comments regarding the lost archives of HIV.
I can let the historian take that.
So I'm very much finding that with, I'm trying to find the question so that I can make sure I answer it correctly. Where did it go? So as a historian, like, what I'm trying to do is, the importance of it being daily is so that I can record things daily. So I can ground what it is that I'm doing and what I'm feeling within the news of the day. I'm not as great with recording what's happening newswise daily. I would be better, but some days just not able to. But I do find that the collective amnesia is really interesting right now, because we have this weird sense of time where we're really not quite sure what's going on at what point. How long have we been, like, some of us have been working from home for over a month. Some have been shorter. The whole March lasted 10 years and April's going really, really quickly. And in terms of archiving, like I said, I'm trying to create with my work, having it exist in multiple places, so that it's readily available, regardless of, like I said, if my house burns down. I want people to still be able to find and read and have this act as this is what's happening on this date.
For my comics, because of my restrictions now, I have to kind of lean into the collective amnesia a little bit. Since, like, at most I can update twice a week, sometimes just once a week. I sit down before I start making my comic, and then I just let things bubble up to the surface, whatever seems to take priority, and I absolutely am going to miss stuff. And that actually just reflects the nature of my life right now. In this time, some of us are busier than others. Some of us are bored of our minds. That's just the reflection. I'm just incredibly busy. So if I've missed stuff, that's in the comic as it is, and that's just life. So I know that there's things that I've missed. There's every once in a while I remember, oh yeah, I was going to put this like 2 weeks ago. Oh shit, how am I going to include that now?
And I think, just so saying, like, I mean, we're individuals. We can't on our own record everything. Otherwise we wouldn't sleep. We'd just be creating and recording. So it's important that we pick up on what's important to our own interests and what it is that we find interesting to ourselves. Like, I hadn't really seen anything else that people making when it was announced that oh my gosh, I completely blanked on this. I feel really, really silly.
No worries.
The big pilgrimage to Mecca, and I'm blanking on the Hajj. Thank you. I was like, it's right on the tip of my tongue, and I cannot remember, which is really embarrassing.
It's all good.
I wasn't seeing many people talking about what that could mean, and I wanted to make sure that it was at least written down and included. I have to actually go back now and do more research, and it's been a couple weeks since it was sort of announced that it might be canceled this year. And also looking back, like with that, looking back into the historical of when has it been canceled in the past and why, and being canceled for a pandemic is not unprecedented. It's happened several times in the past. And that's something that I have an interest in the Middle East, and I want to make sure that I pull in my own historical interests and bring them through to the present day.
It'll be really interesting when we're years out from this and things have hopefully settled to see analysis of what's been created now and see the plus minus on what was the tone like. Were people deluding themselves? Were my comics too Pollyanna? I mean, I'm looking forward to that, to seeing what that final analysis is. Like, where I'm seeing the comments about how there's already collective amnesia of people painting too bright a picture. Time will tell, and it will be really cool to see how that was reflected in the comics that we're making now.
I'm very much looking forward to, like, the comic that's going up today is, I don't really touch on COVID too much, but it's talking about how everyone's angry about the costume designs for the new Dune movie. Like, that is just something that's going on and people are angry about it. And I'm like, why are you angry about this? Like, yes, they're kind of boring, but like, the post office is like potentially shutting down. There's voter suppression. There's so many things we should actually be angry about. But I'm looking forward to someone going like, and Beth was concerned about this on this day. It's like, no, I wasn't. But like, this is sort of collecting what the world at large was concerned about at this point. And the world at large,
how are we
just
distracting ourselves,
Twitter.
right? What
exactly.
are we concentrating on? Yeah.
Exactly.
It's fascinating.
Anger is exhausting. What are we turning from our anger at the world in general to more specific things that we feel like we can control?
I want to say, as a librarian, just that my perspective, my concern is the fact that there are so many voices we're not hearing, the fact that this is because of health disparities, that it's hitting minority groups, those that already have health disparities. It's just hitting them that much harder. Well, they don't have the time or energy really to create the comics, to create this, and that's something that I'm afraid will get lost in the historical accounts, that we won't properly give the systemic problems that caused this, and that
definitely
bear witness to those as well.
And as a creator, I'm very much aware of the fact that I work part-time, and I have a part-time office job working in libraries, and then the rest of my time I make comics, and I'm very aware of the fact that that there are days that I'm just like, my mental health is not good today. So if I don't do a great comic, it's fine. But there are people whose stories are not being told. So you're hearing the middle-class white person's story who lives with one person, and we're both taking this very seriously and are very healthy. Neither of us are sick. We don't have people in our families who at this point are sick. And it's a completely different perspective, and I would really, really hope that we get more of those perspectives, either in comics or in diaries.
My constant fear is my mom's going to get sick. She lives nearby and she's in my pod. If she gets sick, I mean, obviously all of the worries that come with that, but then I will have to take care of her. I will not be, what little time I have to do comics now will be gone. That is way on the bottom of my list of things I'm worried about, but I'm already razor's edge as it is with my time. So the moment I have to go full-time caregiver for somebody, I'm out. And that's going to stink, because that's probably the thing I'd want to be documenting the most. But
yeah, MK.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the analysis comment about voices not being heard. When I talked a little earlier about prioritizing or the priorities of what at this point is making the site, in addition to, as I said, stories that aren't being heard, voices aren't being heard, there was a question in the chat about geographic representation. And if you look at the comics that are on the site, that has been a priority of ours. We do have comics there from obviously the UK, also still English speaking though, but India, Vietnam, Taiwan, and obviously all of our wonderful colleagues at Medicina Graphica, Spanish language comics. In those span several geographic areas. So I just wanted to kind of not to say that we've done as good a job as we can, but it certainly is a high priority. So I hope that taking a quick look will help realize that we are at least making an effort to do that. Obviously, one of the things we struggle with in graphic medicine is our own linguistic limitations, but we try to do what we can to overcome that.
I would encourage anyone, if you know of any that you think we may have missed, always send them to us. At any of us on social media, use the contact form on the website. Like Alice and MK talked on this, and so did everybody. There's no way to keep up with everything going on. Even the number of comics coming out, I attempted to keep up for a week early on, and even then it was too much. So we are a little over time. There are a couple of questions left in here, and I'm sorry if we didn't get to yours. I'm sure the panelists would be happy to follow up with you later if you contact them via all their social media pages. So I just want to, the last thing I'll get from everybody is a little bit lighter. So Amber asked, what are you all reading right now? That's not COVID related, and then we'll close out after that.
I'm reading Robert Graves' World War I memoir, Goodbye to All That, as my light reading. As I said, my specialty is World War I, and it is not directly related to my primary area of interest being the Arab Revolt and T.E. Lawrence, so I'm considering this a light, fun read.
I'm not reading anything. I'm too busy. I'm sorry. It's just my reality. I normally read when I have spare time, but I just don't. I get like an hour to myself every day, so I'm bumming in front of the TV.
What are you watching then?
Currently, I'm either playing Animal Crossing or my husband's playing the Final Fantasy VII remake. We're kind of splitting the TV time between the two of us, and then I collapse into an exhausted puddle and do it all again the next day. So,
Same. Yes. Well, both my husband and I are playing Animal Crossing, but then he's playing the Final Fantasy VII remake.
That's amazing. That split.
I'm also not light reading, but The Secret Lives of Color, which is talking about the historical analysis of each color, and that's an interesting thing that I've been reading. And I just finished Terry Pratchett book in Discworld, so that's my
good
light reading.
I think
I'm
you
teaching
just
a class on dying and death. You don't want to know what I'm reading. Like, for example, Katie Butler's The Art of Dying Well. This is my casual reading.
I mean, that sounds fascinating. That would totally be on my casual reading list. So.
Well, I've made my syllabus public, and you can find a link on our website or somewhere. I can send it to you, but yeah.
Well, thank you all. I'm reading like 8 things at a time as per usual. So
Well, give us one.
Give you one. I'm reading, it's sitting next to me. Uncommon Grounds, The History of Coffee.
Perfect for you.
It's pretty
That
much
sounds amazing.
It's on brand for me.
Awesome.
Yeah, so thank you all for joining us for this. Your work is fantastic. Please keep it up. Let everybody know if there's ways we can support you. Use that Libcomix online hashtag and people will find it. So yeah, you all have a great night. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.